So it is finally time to go over Cyber Dragons again now that Cyber Dragon Nashta has finally been released in the TCG. My copies of Nashta just came through today. I think I am pronouncing it wrong. I'm sorry, it's a force of habit. But yes, so I shall get straight into the deck profile and I will not leave you waiting for much longer. So starting off the profile, we have 3 copies of Cyber Dragon. It's best, you know, the whole deck revolves around it. 3 copies of Core. This is one of the best cards in the... I'll say this a lot. One of the best cards in the deck. It's our searcher for basically our gateway to everything. Great card. I really love it, and you can machine dupe it. Then we have 3 copies of Cyber Dragon Hertz. Now this card is also really great. It just recurs a lot. It recurs your Cyber Dragons from grave. Combos well with Galaxy Soldier. Really good card. It does have an effect to make it level 5 as well, although that seldom gets used. Then finally, 3 copies of Cyber Dragon Nashta. This card is so pretty. I don't know if that's in focus or not, but this card is just absolutely pretty and it's absolutely amazing. The deeper into the game state you get, the better it gets, because the more stuff you will have in your graveyard. This card is amazingly good at extending your combos, and it's a machine dupe target at the same time. Works to get, you can bring back Infinity, a lot of people say that, but also it brings back Chimera-Tech Rampage Dragon, which is one of my personal favourites to bring back with this card, because that card is just insane. So yeah, this card is amazing and absolutely 100% welcome in the deck. Lastly, for the Cyber Dragon monsters, we have 1 copy of Veer. I'm still personally running this because it works a lot. It actually works differently here than it does in the OCG. You'll see in the OCG they don't run it because the way in which effects are allowed to resolve in the OCG is slightly different. They can't chain block things with Veer, so you can't normal summon Core, activate its effects, and chain Veer before they have a chance to respond with a hand trap. Whereas here you can do that. So this card chain blocks Core, and it also chain blocks Nashta's effect as well. So that's all of the Cyber Dragon monsters. This card should be a Cyber Dragon, honestly, but oh well. 3 copies of Galaxy Soldier. This is an amazing card. I'm still personally playing 3 because this is a card you do want to see in your opening hand. So logically, you would play 3 to maximize the chance of doing that. I have seen people playing 2. I just do not agree with it personally. Then we are playing 1 Kaiju, Jizukiri, the Star Destroying Kaiju. This card is just a really great card to search. We only play 1 of it for that reason, otherwise it's a monumental brick. But yeah, it's a really good spot removal card, especially for cards that we can't deal with using the Chimera-Tech Twins. And then lastly, for the monster count, the only hand trap, well, aside from impermanence, the only hand trap I'm running are 3 copies of Ash Blossom. I've seen people cut it in favour of DD Crow. It's all down to personal preference. At a local level, I think Ash Blossom is absolutely fine. That's usually the level of play that I go to. Sometimes I go to regionals, and I would probably change these for DD Crows otherwise. But yeah, Ash Blossom is absolutely great still. So yeah. So that rounds off the monsters. The spells are quite standard. 3 copies of Cyber Emergency. This is our main search card. It searches for Core, Nashta, any of our names. If you're maining or siding Elton in, then this can also search Elton in, which is really great. The only thing this can't search is Galaxy Soldier, but that's why we play 2 copies of Cyber Repair Plant. This is a great card as well. It just requires a little bit more setup. So this can search for everything that Cyber Emergency can, and a little bit more. It can recycle stuff if you're late in the game, and it can also search you Galaxy Soldier and any Cyber Dragon card that you need. Then we are playing 2 copies of Cyber Rev System. Now, I see people are still playing 1. I personally don't know why, because this card is just incredible, especially with Cyber Dragon Nashta now, because this card can indirectly bring back Chimera-Tech Rampage Dragon from the graveyard and Infinity, which it could not do before, all thanks to Cyber Dragon Nashta. So, and the fact that what you bring back can't be destroyed by card effects. If you bring back Cyber Dragon Ziga with this card, it makes it 10 times better. Then lastly, for the actual Cyber spell cards, one copy of Xyz Fusion. I think we only, I feel like we only need one. I have done a lot of testing with the deck since Nashta was actually announced for TCG release, and I've never really wanted more than one of this. I always feel that this is a card that we just search when we need to end the game and nothing more. Then for our more generic spells, we have 3 copies of Machine Duplication. This card is absolutely nuts. No reason why you should be playing any less than 3, especially now that Nashta is in the TCG and we have 3 targets for it, for Machine Dupe. Then this is more of a preference, but 3 copies of Overload Fusion, because I love making Chimera Tech Rampage Dragon. It's an absolutely obscene fusion monster, and if I see a list that's not playing 3 Overload Fusion, I just don't agree with it. I love seeing this card. You want to see it in your opening hand, extend your OTK, all of that. Then this is more of an experimental card. I'm not quite sure what I'm actually going to add in its place if I were to cut it, but yeah, this is just an extra slot for experimentation. 1 copy of Power Bond. As I said, I don't know what else I would really put in. I decided I wanted to kind of cheese it a bit with Power Bond. It's alright, I don't see it all that often, it is only a one-off, but it does result in some quite funny scenarios. It is also the only other way we make Cyber Twin in this deck other than Cyberload Fusion. Then lastly, 2 copies of Called by the Grave, because hand traps, especially Droll, really cause problems for the deck. So, you know, we should probably have something to do with that, right? Then, lastly, for the main deck, the traps. As I said before, we are playing 2 copies of Impermanence because this is just a really good card. It does get around Called by the Grave, and if you set it then in a certain spell and trap card zone, then you can effectively not only get a monster negate, but also negate the spell and trap cards that your opponent controls in the same column as this card. So that makes it really good. Then lastly, 1 copy of Cybernetic Overflow. I was running 2, but I think 1 is preferable now. There's just not much space for it for 2 copies. I could drop down Power Bond and add in a 2nd copy, but I don't honestly think it's needed. But yeah, so that rounds off the main deck. Then getting on to the extra deck, we have 1 copy of Cyber Dragon Zyga. Now, I really do want to play a 2nd copy, however, I've really not found a good reason to actually play the 2nd copy, to be honest. I usually feel that 1 is all I need, and considering it can be brought back, it can be recycled with Cyber Repair Plant and Cyberload Fusion, I just don't have a reason to play more. Then 1 copy of Cliffort Genius. I really want to get an ultra copy of this. However, I just don't have access to that at the moment. The Cyber Dragon Nashtas were the only thing I actually pre-ordered from Duel Power at all. Then 1 copy of Sunsork. This card is just absolutely incredible. Gets you to anything that you're missing. You can extend your plays a bit more. It also allows you to set up the Griffin Seeger board with Infinity in tow, and just as a really good first turn board. So yeah, this card is just incredible. Fortunately, if this card does get the axe, although I think that's not actually very likely with the absence of Needle Fiber in our format, if this did get hit, then the deck would still be okay, all thanks to the fact that we do have Cyber Dragon Nashta now. Otherwise, it might be some of our plays might be a bit limited. Then 1 copy of Nightmare Griffin. I contemplated cutting this, but ultimately I'm keeping it in the build for the time being because we can still make the board going first, and it is still a very strong, very powerful first turn board to make, so it stays. Then 1 copy of Linkuriboh. I think it's time this card came back into the build again. I haven't been running it for a while, but because we have more level 1s now, we have 2 level 1s in the deck at 3 copies, you know, and also this card has some really nice interactions with things like Cyber Dragon Nashta. If you were I only thought was told about this the other day. But if you have Cyber Dragon Nashter and you activate its effect to revive something from grave, if you have Linkuriboh in grave, you can, and your opponent tries to impermanence this, then you can actually chain this in grave by tributing this to special summon it, and then this will still resolve. The effect of Nashter that locks you into machines does not actually come into effect until resolution, so, and by that point it hasn't resolved yet. So it is a perfectly legal play and is a very good way to dodge hand traps. So yeah, that rounds off the Link monsters. There are only 5 of them. We don't really rely on Link monsters that much. Zyga is our main go-to, as well as Summonsort. But yeah, Linkuriboh does also fix some of the more bricky hands that we could end up with. You know, it is a combo deck. We don't really have one card combos. But yeah. Then Xyz monsters, 2 copies of Cyber Dragon Nova. I absolutely adore this card. It is incredible. Such an amazing card. It floats into Rampage if your opponent is stupid enough to Ghost Ogre it or Warning it. It makes our OTKs a little bit more consistent. If you can go for it, the Nova Zyga OTK is pretty powerful. And yeah, it also allows us to go into Cyber Dragon Infinity, which is a really, really great card as well in its own right. There's not much more to say about that, about it, other than it's just our main negate. But yeah. Then going on to the fusions, I am running 2 copies of Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. This card is basically El Shaddoll Construct on crack. It is an incredible card. It's a foolish for 2 cards, which is a pseudo search for Core or Nashter. It sets up our grave. It's a level 5, which means we can make Nova with it. It's basically the big red button of the deck. It's an incredible card, and I would not run it at any less than 2. 3 copies I don't think is necessary, even with 3 Overload Fusion in the deck. Sometimes I wish I had more, but that would just be a bit win more. Then the Chimeratech Twins, we have 1 copy of Fortress Dragon, because, you know, just for regular machine decks, like trains and stuff, and then 2 copies of Mega Fleet, just to deal with some pesky extra deck monsters that your opponent might have. Just gives us some inherent clearance. Then lastly for the fusions, 1 copy of Cyber Twin, which we can extend into with either Power Bond or with Cyberload Fusion to push for game, because you don't need to activate, this card doesn't activate any effects, so you can just make this after you've attacked with everything during the battle phase using Cyberload Fusion, and just extend for another like 28 or 5600 points of damage. So that's also really good. So there are some honourable mentions I actually have to make, because obviously I've tested this deck quite a bit, and there are a couple of cards that I was playing that I ultimately cut because I didn't think they were really necessary, or there just wasn't space for it. So the first honourable mention, I think some people will be asking about in watching the video, especially at the spellcard section, is 1-for-1. So I contemplated making this, but I really do not like the discard. I would much rather just play the 3 Nashter and 3 Hertz, because Nashter isn't particularly great early game. It's much better if you have access to it late game. 1-for-1 late game isn't that great, because we won't have all the resources necessary to actually resolve 1-for-1 at all. So I don't think it's that necessary. Likewise with Foolish Burial. The next honourable mention is Instant Fusion. With the inclusion of Cyber Dragon Nashter in the TCG, I don't think that Instant Fusion is actually required anymore. I haven't been running it for a while before in my regular build, as you may have seen in my previous profiles, but I just don't think this card is needed, especially considering that the Panzer Dragon would just take up the extra deck space. Now, one of the cards I do have an honourable mention for is a card that I do somewhat want to include back into the deck at some point, and that is Evenly Matched. It is a good card. It is an incredible blowout card. It deals with both back row back row heavy decks and decks that try and set up a big board, punishing both of them for doing so, for overcommitting. But honestly, I just don't have the space for it at some point. Maybe with some further testing, I shall find some space for it or relegate it to the side deck. And then lastly, an honourable mention, a very irregular honourable mention, but an honourable mention all the same, is the new kaiju that came out in Savage Strike, the Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mecha Thunder King. That is a mouthful to say. So, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but a few, like, during the week that the January ban list came into effect, I did actually take a kaiju variant of the deck, obviously without Nashta in it, to locals, and I did get third place with it. My losses were to the same person twice. That was funny because our locals has a top 4 cut. I ended up going against the same dinosaur player twice. That was very funny. But yeah, that aside, the interesting thing about this is that it can be brought back with Cyber Dragon Nashta, because it does have 2100 defense. I will, if there isn't already, there should be a picture of the exact list I took to locals. There, I am planning on doing a kaiju variant of this with post Duel Power as well, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, this is my honourable mention mainly because of its interaction with Nashta. So yeah guys, that is the end of the deck profile. If you did enjoy, then please don't hesitate to click that like button, comment any suggestions you have for improvements, and also I have started a Twitter called Chimera Tech Rage. It should be on the screen right now. So if you want to give me a follow and stay updated with everything else, then please do. So thank you very much for watching, and see you guys next time.